So if you can create an environment where you're now encouraging and rewarding your people to be good and kind and supportive and encouraging and empathetic and empowering for each other, oh man, now you've really created something special.
Welcome back. It's Relationships at Work, your leadership guide to building workplace connections and avoiding blind spots. I'm your host, Russel Lolacher, communications leadership expert with a couple of decades of experience in both those areas. Whole heap of curiosity, too, just like you, on how we can make the workplace better. If you're a leader trying to understand and improve your impact on work culture and the employee experience, you're in the right place. You're also in the place where we're hitting a milestone today. 250 episodes. 250. 3 years and change I've had the absolute pleasure of doing this podcast. Hey, if you want to learn a lot about a topic, even though you think you know a bit, start a podcast about it. Oh, it has been a front row seat to some amazing insights and stories and experiences. I am thrilled and honored to have had the guests I've had. And thank you so much for being here on the ride with me, learning, prioritizing your own development. Crazy, 250. It's weird to write it down. I will mention I will be talking about some of the lessons I've learned in the newsletter later this week and in the mini episode I release on Thursday. I'm not going to go through every single 125 in the mini episode, but I will talk about some of the themes that I've taken away from this journey. Wow. Okay. I'm going to stop being blown away by the amount of sheer work that's been gone into this show. And let's get into this episode. It's a fun one. It's an interesting one. It's an important one because, we want to be inspired. We want to be motivated. That's a big piece of this show, is having honest conversations about what gets us going at work and what doesn't get us going at work. And we as leaders, we have to figure this out for ourselves and in helping our teams. Employees are becoming more and more disengaged. Detachment is a word that's being used a lot right now when it comes to employees and their engagement with workplace cultures. The recently released Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2025, it reports that global employee engagement declined to 21% last year. And in the US, decade low of 31%. The report actually links that low engagement to, get this, $8.9 trillion in lost productivity. That's trillion with a T. About 9% of global GDP is lost, linked to employee engagement or disengagement. That's insane. So we're going to discuss this a bit in our upcoming conversation. And we talk about the Gallup poll, but I think we referenced the one from 2023. So the number's a little bit different. But spoiler, it's still not good. But as with most things, all this is just a huge opportunity for us as leaders to figure it out, get serious about it, and address this for those we're responsible for, ourselves and our teams. Our guest today has some ideas about that. Hold on. And on the show today, we have Dr. Alise Cortez, and here is why she is awesome. She's a speaker, author, organizational psychologist, and logotherapist. I had to look up what a logotherapist is. It has nothing to do with branding. She is the Chief Ignition Officer for Gusto Now, which helps companies in their human and organizational transformation by activating meaning and purpose. She's also a management consultant and Chief Purpose Officer through her agency, Dr. Alise Cortez and Associates. And she's a host of her very own Working on Purpose podcast through Voice America Talk Radio. I'm a sucker for fellow podcasters. She also wrote a pretty great book I strongly recommend you check out, The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And she's here. Hello, Alise.
Russell, what a fantastic introduction. Thank you for having me on. This is so fun already.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to, I know everything we talk about today is going to have purpose. So we will definitely be weaving our way in and out of there. Before we get into our conversation today around inspirational development, though, I do want to talk about, well, your first experience as an employee. So the first question I ask all of my guests, Alise, is what's your best or worst employee experience?
Mm-hmm. And it happens to be really one of my very first experiences. So and I tell the story a lot. I'll be brief about it here. But I had the fantastic pleasure of growing up in a very small town in northeastern Oregon, population 4,800. And at that time, I had one aspiration, that was to get the heck out of Dodge, right? And so I worked for my parents in the restaurant, grew up in high school. And I also had this co-op job working at the front desk of this pumping company. And I met the owner. And he would call in from the grand city of Portland, Oregon on occasion. But one day he uttered these amazing words to me. He said, if you ever find yourself in Portland, you've got a job with me. And that's what we call a ticket out, Russell. That was the first time he saved me, is he hired me and got me out of that small town. He had a commercial real estate development company, and I was his front desk sort of admin person, and had an amazing time working for this man. He was a Czechoslovakian American, bigger than life, huge personality. He taught me so much, believed in me, and he was a great gobs of fun to work with. And one day, 18 months on the job, I was sitting there at my little front desk behind my IBM Select typewriter, and he walked past me on the way out for lunch, and as he opened the door, over the shoulder, he said as he walked out, you got to get out of here. You got to see the world. You got to do something with yourself. But before you go, hire your replacement. And the door shut behind him. So I was quite surprised to realize that he had just fired me. So that was the second time that he saved me. And why is that? Because before he said the things he said to me, Russell, I did not know, one, I could go to college. My parents were entrepreneurs. They didn't finish high school. We never talked about college. Let's see, because of that push, let's see, 1 bachelor's, 3 master's, and a PhD. I think I can check the education box. He told me to go see the world. I probably wouldn't have joined my boyfriend at age 26, who I knew for a month, to go join him to live in Madrid, Spain, and then later Brazil for a total of 3 years, if I hadn't heard that from him. He really was an incredible figure in my life. So that was definitely, I would say, the best experience that I've ever had working. And why would that be? I mean, I care about potential. I care about realizing your potential, growing and transforming. And he did all of that for me, Russell.
How have you paid it forward with that experience in your life? Because I'll be honest, most people I talk to when they talk about their first jobs, it's not always a pleasant experience, because 9 times out of 10, they have bosses with no training, no leadership experience themselves. So it's usually a pretty bad experience. This was transformative for you.
Yeah.
How did you pay it forward?
I also went on to fire several people. Well, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, I do a lot of pro bono mentoring and coaching, et cetera. And in fact, I have a client here in Dallas that what they do is they do life coaching for really at-risk students. And I gift them various programs throughout the years. And of course, anytime anybody has a question like, what do you think about this? How should I go about this? I'm happy to talk to people. But for me, it's been just a way, and even my speaking, right? Just being out speaking and delivering these messages of inspiration and hope and encouragement, and encouraging people, plucking them from their comfort zone to reach for more. That's just kind of my everyday kind of life.
It so speaks to the fact that, and again, thrilled you have a good example, because having those stories, I ask this question all the time, and so often it's negative, and so often it's something people are carrying with them 20, 30 years later. And for yourself, same thing, but it was more of an inspirational piece, which really reinforces leaders have such an influence and impact on people they have no concept of.
Huge. And to that end, Russell, that's one of the reasons that I'm an organizational psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not an abnormal psychologist, although some of that is involved. Let's just face it, right? But I believe very much in the playground of life in the world of work. I believe in the potential of that. And yet, to your point, it has such devastating consequences for so many people.
So let's get inspiring. Let's not go down the rabbit hole of negativity. Define inspirational development. I always find it interesting on this show. We get these interesting concepts, but I don't think we always define things in the workplace as often as we should. Usually those are general concepts like diversity. I'm like, okay, now define it. Stop using it in everything, and now tell me what. So for the purposes of our conversation today, how would you define inspirational development for the workplace?
I don't know that I use that particular phrase, that combination of two words, but what I would say is development is obviously a huge part of everything that I do, helping people to develop and grow. But everything that I'm going to be anchored in is in the realm, as you said at the beginning of the show, of meaning and purpose. And so if we say inspirational development, which is actually kind of a new phrase, I kind of like it. Thanks, Russell, for that. What I would situate that in is a lot of the work that I do, Russell, is helping people through my programs to awaken to and get access again to their passion, their inspiration, and be very present to what their mindset is. And that's all anchored in the world of logotherapy, the world of meaning. So for listeners and viewers, if you don't know what logotherapy is, and I would doubt that you do, logos is a Greek word for meaning. So really it's about vitalizing and healing through meaning. And so if we want to talk about inspirational development, then the first place to start would be to help people literally learn how to turn themselves on from the inside out. And that's a lot of the work that I do. And you can do that by helping them access what are they passionate about, what inspires them, and help them continue to look for ways that they are inspired, and then really be mindful and intervene in that governing mindset. That's the first thing that I would say. And then we could talk about the leadership part of things, which is a whole other realm, really heavily anchored in the world of inspiration, at least when it's done well.
And I'm certainly not going to take credit for that. I think that's something I pulled out of we had a pre-chat a little while ago before we got into this. And I swear it's something you said. And I'm like, ooh, I love that. So it was, so I'm going to flip it back to you. And you came up with your own term.
Okay, well, thanks. I'll take it. I like it.
Because we have professional development. So we have this thing where we have you on a learning plan if organizations actually did that most of the time, which they never do. But there is always this talk about development. There's always this talk about that. So what are we missing that we need to take that extra step further?
Do you mean for the general workforce, or do you mean for leaders?
Both. Okay. I think, yeah, both. I mean, for leaders for sure, but I think generally to create leaders, we also have to go down this path.
I could talk for eons about this. Okay.
We got about 40 minutes.
But I won't. So the first thing I would say is people, if you ask most people, about their work, they're going to go, is it the weekend yet? I mean, most people, and I don't know what the engagement rates are these days, but I think it's 60% maybe if people are really engaged in their work at best.
I think it's far lower actually than that, but
okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's the place to start right there. So we already know we need to do something to vitalize the experience of being in the world of work. And I think it goes a long way to help people to get connected to what are they passionate about, and looking for them to be unique individual human beings who you appreciate, so that they know that they matter. There's a whole inquiry in the world of mattering today. How do you help people understand they matter? And one is you help them understand how it is that they're valuable, who they are, their contribution, and that they add value. And when you communicate, that goes a long way. And unfortunately, for some reason, we have to teach people how to do that. It's not something that seems to be standard behavior. When it comes to developing leaders, let me situate some really interesting research that came from Bain Consulting. They had done some research several years ago, it's been a good 10 years now, where they worked with about 300 different companies to come up with this. But the long and short of it, Russell, is that they came up with this way of sort of measuring the productivity of engagement levels. And they came up with 4 levels of engagement. One are dissatisfied employees, then satisfied, engaged, and inspired. And so what they said is, if we put the productivity measure of the satisfied employee at 100, forget that then the dissatisfied is going to be pulling you back. So if the satisfied employee is at a productivity level of 100, the engaged employee is at 144, the inspired employee is at 225. So that's where we talk about the difference when you've got an inspired workforce. And how do you inspire them is you help them, you communicate to them that they're part of something pretty magnificent. And you help them understand their place in that organization and why they're important. And then you keep pulling them and transforming them up to their higher potential. Now you get an inspired employee. Now, it takes a pretty gifted leader to be able to do that, right? It takes somebody who knows how to be an inspirational leader to do that. And the first thing that has to happen for them, you're going to be just shocked at this, I know, is they have to be turned on by their own life first. They got to be turned on themselves. You cannot inspire somebody else if you're not inspired first by your own life. So I'll stop there for a second.
Fair. Before we move on, I did a quick look. 32%. Gallup did a poll.
32%.
In 2024, 32% is the engagement rate right now of employees in the United States specifically.
Yeah. So what that means is for every 3 people that you have on your team, one of them is really pulling you forward, and 2 of them are kind of either, if not holding you steady, then pulling you back. It's so critical to understand this stuff.
And there's a big opportunity here for a lot of leaders. I want to dig into your point of we need better leaders to create better leaders. And we seem to have the systemic broken problem of that's not what we have in the general workforce.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people in leadership roles that have no leadership experience. They're managers. They're
Right.
not leaders. And yet
Right.
we'll call them a leader.
Right.
We'll call them a leadership team. And I'm like, but they don't do anything that would pertain to what we would define as a leader. Where do we start? Because, I mean, to your point, we said, is it the workforce, is it leadership? I'm like, shouldn't it be at the front line level? Is it at the executive level? Because that seems to be where all the money is. That's why you have so many executive coaches. Not that's where we should be spending our time. So if we're here to engage our employees, to get them inspired, to get them connected, where do we start in this employee journey?
Well, I love that question. When I'm working with organizations, it's everybody's job, right? It's not just the executives, it's not just the managers, it's not just supervisors. It's also the every employee to be able to speak their mind and say what's working for them and what's not. So there's everybody's hands and voice and head matter. I definitely think that that's why I distinguish for my programs, my company, another company that I run is called Gusto Now. And I created a program for managers and one for executives because to your point, managers do different things than leaders. Managers are really managing and ensuring the actual work gets done. And the leaders are really casting that bigger vision for people to come into and be inspired by. It's a very different set of responsibilities. So I do believe, and this is what I've come to, Russell, is why I do what I do at Gusto Now is we're doubling down on humanity in the age of technology. So we're teaching people how to be really better human beings, better to each other, and that includes developing the emotional intelligence, leading with empathy, learning how to listen and to communicate people's value. Some people think, well, I told them last year that they were doing great. Yeah, that's not it. That doesn't cut it. So I do believe that every part of the organization needs to be developed and touched and grow. And it's not just a once a year deal, it's an ongoing thing.
Hey, if you're enjoying the insights from our guests, you'll love our Raw Notes newsletter. It's packed with guest takeaways, the resources that inspire them, and my own tips on how we as leaders can be better humans for the humans that we're responsible for. Go to relationshipsatworkshow.com and subscribe now and help the workplace be more human.
Diversity always comes into play for me when we talk about things like we need to get everybody's purpose. We need to inspire everybody. I'm like, everybody's idea of purpose, inspiration are very different generations, culture. How do we approach it from a diversity lens? Because different people are motivated by different things.
Well, let me back up first and say that so when I look at some of the best practices that I have out there, in fact, later on today, I'm going to be doing a pre-recorded conversation with Carlos Rey, who is in Barcelona, Spain, and they are actually measuring purpose in organizations. It's amazing the work that he's doing. I can't wait to talk to him. But when I look at what I consider to be some of the best practices, like this is best in class stuff. I think Bimbo is one of the companies, and I think they're South American, and that they do ingredients and things for restaurants, baking, things like that. I think they have like 130,000 employees, if I remember this correctly. But they actually have this process where they start people and they are enrolled immediately, and they start into a program where right out of the gate, they are taught how to start looking for and discovering their own purpose, and then looking to see how can they thread that through that of the organization. And it doesn't matter wherever you are on that space, but the idea that you're going to be brought into an organization and encouraged and invited and given a platform to help look for that for you, that's amazing. And it doesn't matter whatever it is. Like if you say, well, for me, it's just this or whatever, that goes back to the diversity lens. And for some people, this is like, man, we're going to Mars and back here kind of thing. So yeah, to your point, some people are like, I don't really care that much. I just want to know that I matter here and you guys care about my well-being and it pays pretty good. And that's why being a meaning at work researcher as I am, I learned that what people find valuable and meaningful wildly varies. I found 15 modes of engagement that really actually extend to the levels of meaning that people experience or like to experience. And those levels relate to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and beyond.
Oh, I'm going to ask you a couple of levels. But before we do, I just wanted to mention that I love the idea of it always worries me when we talk about these big ideas and things, but we don't talk about operationalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to talk about this other organization who's looking literally at onboarding and onward,
Yeah.
because I can't tell you how many stories of conversations I have with people, and onboarding is the biggest failure.
Yeah.
The first impression is they come into an organizations don't even remember they hired people.
Right.
No computer works for them, or like there's all this first impressions that we fail at miserably.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're supposed to do follow-ups right up to the exit interview that never seem to happen.
Yeah.
So for them to focus on purpose right out of the gate and build on that, it makes me cry a little.
I know.
Of
Isn't
joy.
it beautiful? It's so beautiful.
So we talk about 15 levels of engagement. I'm kind of curious. Obviously, I don't want you to go through listing all of them, but give me a sense of what that looks like from just from a spread, I guess, through it.
Yeah. So it's been really amazing to get to do this research. And just to sort of situate first, how I came up with them was when I asked people, what do you find meaningful in your work? And why is that important to you? And then I would ask, how important is your work to your sense of self? So what I did was I coded all of their interviews. It was like 2,500 pages. And so when I was coding, the higher the level that, you go up Maslow's hierarchy. So, we have physical security and then belonging and esteem and values, and you get into sort of more of the purpose sort of realm as you go. So the higher that they would talk about what they found valuable or meaningful in their work would find them higher on this graph. And then I want to understand, how is your work related? And people would say things like, it's 1% of me. There's no connection to really who I am. It's separate from me. Others would say I'm expressing myself. It just fits me. Others would say it's inseparable, and others would also say there's a conflict between me and my work. So based on all of that, then I was able to take and chart on this graph from highest, most engaged, elated person with their work at the very top, down to the very, very bottom, which were people in existential crisis. The top one is called transcendental connection. And that's really where people are feeling like their work is like the highest, like it's a spiritual quality to it. It's definitely purpose, and there's no separation between who they are. And those are people that tended to be priests, rabbis, and like a spiritual counselor, etc., because they really are connecting to a higher being kind of thing. In the middle, you had people that were doing instrumental sort of. It was an instrumental relationship. In other words, we were trading skills for a paycheck here, and having many other things in life that are very important to me. But I appreciate the job and the work for what it enables for the rest of my life. A middle tier, so not super, super engaged, but in it. So it's interesting. At the very bottom is the people that literally are. It's so miserable, but feel stuck in their job because they need the money or et cetera. And it's a horrible, dismal experience. It negatively impacts how they feel about themselves, their self-esteem, and it's just miserable. So to quickly illustrate kind of how this kind of plays out and looks like in the real life, there were 3 people in the 115 people that I interviewed that were in existential crisis. And my research design was such that I did all the coding, I did everybody's individual, I think you're in this mode when I interviewed you. And here's the sheet that I wrote about why I think and we would have a conversation. They'd share all the research, share theirs, and say, do you agree with me that was the mode you had when I interviewed you? And has it changed since talked, which is 6 months to a year? So I wasn't looking forward to having the conversations with the 3 people. I mean, who wants to tell somebody that you're in existential crisis? So one of them was a chef, and I reach out to him, and I'm hoping he doesn't answer the phone, but he picks up. He's like, hey, Alise, how's it going? It's so great. I'm so happy to talk to you. I'm now in conflicted fit, which is like another 5 feet up, but 5 levels up, but still negative. And for him to understand and recognize somewhat joyfully, he said, when you interviewed me, and when I interviewed him, Russell, he literally, during the 90-minute interview, we were in his restaurant having dinner together. He broke down in tears 5 times. It was awful. He was really in a rough spot. He said, after you interviewed me and you sent me my transcript, I shared that transcript with my wife and my mother, and they both sobbed. They had no idea I was so miserable and so unhappy. And that already started to change things. I'm working on weekends when my family's home, etc. He says, but here's the thing. I still have the screamer boss that I have to deal with. I'm still working those crazy, awful hours, but I see my work differently now. I see it now as a way to be able to provide something to my family And my kids are really proud of where I work, etc. But it still isn't where he wants it to be. He's in the right kind of work, but it's not in the right environment. And that's why it's called conflicted fit. So he still has lots of ways he could get more engaged. But anyway, there's way more I could say about that. But it's amazing when people recognize where they are in this whole grid, if you will.
Have you seen this change over the last couple of years through your research? And I ask this because I know of, say, even boomers, Gen X, identity is a big piece. You've mentioned this, where people attach their value to the work and then they get fired. And then their entire identity gets shattered or laid off or whoever. I've done episodes on this very topic where it is such a transformative thing. Meanwhile, we have Gen Z for us Canadians and millennials that are coming up going, work is not who I am. We want, well, I don't know if balance exists, but I sure as hell don't want to be my 9 to 5. Yeah. And that seems to be seeping into other generations. So how have you seen that?
That's a great question, Russell. I must confess, I don't really have a good finger on the pulse for that. I am not super surprised that it would change through the generations. However, the one lens that I do have from a research vantage point is, and this has been really interesting to talk about from a generational vantage point, I do believe that every generation makes us better as a human species. I do not hold the mindset of, oh my gosh, this next one coming in, oh my God, we're totally doomed. I just don't have that at all. I think that the boomers really taught us about the notion of being stable and disciplined and persevering, et cetera. I'm a Gen Xer. We were a little bit more selective about where we put our time, and some kind of balance was important. And the millennials and the Y came in afterwards and said, hey, did you guys get the memo that you don't have to work 90 hours a week? Really, it's not necessary. We can actually work through our values? And then the Zeds, the Z coming in, they're now saying, this stuff's got to be meaningful, and I got to feel like I'm part of some organization that has a purpose beyond just making money. So that I do recognize as a very strong trend. But I don't know that still means that the younger generations are identifying themselves with their work, but they are demanding more meaning and more purpose.
So what's the role of leadership through all this? We've kind of danced around it a little bit and really focused on the individuals of how we could find purpose ourselves going through these engagement interviews and so forth. But as a leader, trying to create an environment where supporting purpose, defining purpose matters beyond just a poster on a wall or an email where we put a whole bunch of vision mission statements that nobody ever reads. What is an actual, and I mean a good leader's modeling of how to support this?
What a great question. This could be a whole podcast itself. But so first, as I said before, I really am most interested in developing inspirational leaders, not just effective leaders, but ones that really are inspiring. And first, that means, again, you got to be turned on by your own life and be proud of who you are being in the world and cascade that passion. And then you've got to be able to communicate the vision. Why does this organization exist, and why should anybody care? And it's not about just how well we're doing for the shareholders. Nobody cares about that if you're inside the organization. So and that's something you've got to be able to continue to do. So what I love doing is helping organizations to be able to articulate that purpose and then start to fold it through into their culture so that it's been reinforced. We're about enabling people to live their best physical health, because we're a healthcare organization. Well, how do we actually live that in the organization? Are we literally working people 16 hours a day? That wouldn't be an illustration of that. So walking the talk is important. Being able then to reward and recognize people who are living the purpose of the organization and its values is another important key element of that leadership. Being able to find what's great in people already and to call that out, but then in so doing, to situate for them, like Roland did for me, a bigger version of themselves that they can grow into. That's incredible leadership, right? And that takes knowing your individual people. Who are they? What do they care about? What are they already great at? What do you see for them that maybe they can't see for themselves that you could help them grow into? Or what are their dreams? Where are they trying to get to? If you could do all those things, because all that's going to happen is those people are going to want to work harder and persevere longer for your organization for whatever period they're there, to be able to deliver on your mission, because you're helping them grow into the person they want to become. And so that idea of the two-way street, and I forget whose work this is, but the idea is if you can situate in the organization that the organization says, I will help you grow, young man, young woman, or whoever it is, and in exchange, you will help us be better as a company. You'll help us realize our mission. That goes a whole long way. So learning how to communicate people's value, when you do give feedback, where it's constructive feedback, do it in a way that doesn't diminish them. Do it in a way that makes them feel like, oh, Russell has my best interest here. He knows that I want to grow. And you learn how to give that feedback in a way that is encouraging and inspiring and not diminishing. You do some of those, just some of those things, and you're on your way to be a much more effective, inspirational leader.
It reminds me of this question that a lot of, and I'm going to use air quotes here for people that are not watching the video, leaders will ask us in, whether it's a performance review, productivity review, whatever you want to call it, what's your 5-year plan? And my answer is always, what's your 5-year plan for me? Because as an employee, my lens is finite. I just see my boss, I see my team, I see the threads in which we are connected. The leaders, if they are leaders, see a bigger picture, or should see a bigger of fit, of vision, of mission, of where we fit into the larger scope. It's so funny how most managers, because they're not leaders, will throw that on the employee being the sole responsibility of figuring it out themselves, when they sit there truthfully with a lot more knowledge where they can actually help, where the purpose, to your point, can flow within the organization or outside the organization to be fired, much like you are. So I always find that burden that these managers throw on employees to be so frustrating.
I think that's beautiful insight, Russell. And the other thing is, to your point, sometimes, of course, an employee doesn't know what they don't know. I mean, and that's what I think makes for a great leader, is help people understand and discover their own potential. I mean, help them be that diamond in the rough and where they're going to come to. The other thing is, sometimes you don't want to tell your boss, well, my 5-year plan is I'm going to have your job, or I'm going to be on I'm going to start my own company. And so you can't really be honest necessarily unless you've created that environment. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you. And so I think the better conversation would be, you can ask that question, but then say, what, even to your point, what do you see for me? Or what do you think could be here for me? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think I kind of maybe should stay away from, kind of thing? But that's only one perspective. That person still, if you start hearing that surround sound, then you probably got something. If they're the one-off person that says, I think you should be an astronaut, and everybody else is saying you are a fantastic chef, well, consider that.
We talked about good leaders need great leaders in order for this to really happen and really to drive to purpose.
Yes.
What do we do in a toxic environment? So say we're a great leader and our leader does not provide psychological safety, an environment, to your point, of being able to be honest about what my 5-year plan is. What do we do?
Oh gosh, before we go into that, so good, Russell, so good. Because to be a really great inspirational leader, firstly, that means you got to be cared for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You do need people, for your people above you, to give you compassion and empathy and support and see you as a unique community. All this stuff has to happen above you too. So if you're in a toxic environment, this is going to be really difficult. And I do know of many situations where the leader is bearing the brunt of a lot of toxicity above, and they try to shield their people below them, which is a beautiful thing. And that's a lot of hard work for that leader. So that would be one thing, is if there's anything you can do to help shield some of that toxicity from your direct team, that would be great. That would mean, though, that you're going to need to find ways to heal yourself or handle all of the stress that comes with having to do that. I think, too, that most people do not feel empowered to say, like, hey, this is ugly, this is icky, we shouldn't be operating this way. They're feeling it, and they come home and tell their loved one about it and complain to them, but they're really not communicating it back into where something can actually get done, the organization. So I think the first thing I would say is, if it's toxic, first say something about it. And yes, I recognize that might mean that you might get fired for that. I understand that, but would you want to stay there anyway? I mean, I recognize if you need the job, I understand that. But first, I would say something. Let's talk about it. Let's raise the flag that this is not acceptable, and in the appropriate places. So I would start there. I mean, you can't do anything about it if people aren't first aware of it's a problem and how it's impacting their performance.
I was recently having a conversation with someone who was frustrated that the problem was that he was thinking his leadership was leadership. So he was all these expectations of how the person should react, how they should be supporting them wasn't happening. I'm like, because you think they're a leader.
Yeah.
They're looking at you as one more thing on their plate that they need to deal with. They're not looking to inspire. They're not looking to grow.
Right.
They are just, you're a cog in a wheel that's frustrating them.
Yeah.
So after 2 years, you need to be looking for other. Nothing's going to change. Like, I can't believe you waited 2 years, but that's a pretty solid bit of research from anthropological research to figure out that this is not working for you. So for you to, and he had purpose. He had amazing amounts of purpose. He knew what he liked. He knew what he loved. He knew what he was connected to. And yet he felt so stunted in the environment.
Yeah. Well, I think you gave him great advice, Russell.
How do you pivot so we talk about purpose, we talk about inspiration, but that doesn't stay the same throughout our careers. For a lot of us, it might change because, say, we get a family, and that might change where our priorities lie,
Right,
where our
right.
values lie.
Right.
As we're in an organization and our purpose and our inspiration changes, how do we pivot through our career to go, okay, my purpose isn't the same anymore. What do I do now?
Yeah, and that's where I think really learning to advocate for yourself individually as individual employees is really important. Because you're right, there's so many people that are maybe taking care of a sick parent, or they are just becoming parents themselves, and that radically changes how you engage with the workforce or want to engage with the workforce. Not the same for everyone. Some people are like, hey man, plowing on, and others are like, I need to kind of ratchet back a little bit here. So communicating that, having created a culture where you can communicate and say, I know that last year I was gunning for being the director, and now I'm married and I've got a child on the way, and I kind of feel like I want to be a little bit more present, so I'd like to dial back that ambition for now, kind of thing. So being able to communicate that to your immediate manager and have an agreement about that, I think is really important. I do see though, however, Russell, and I know you have too, so many people that are managing employees, especially when they're managing women, have the idea of, oh, well, she's got kids, she's got a family, so we don't want to push her too much. And so they don't promote her because they assume that she doesn't want to be promoted because she's got family. And that is a faulty and wrong assumption that really, stunts people's careers, women's especially.
I think the term is the missing rung, where women get to a point and then they don't get that extra level within an organization of promotion because of unconscious bias, because of these assumptions that just poison the organization and take away these opportunities, maybe not explicitly, but certainly impactfully, as numbers are showing us at women at the executive level, because they never got promoted throughout their career. Let's wrap up our conversation on a more positive note, shall we?
Let's do it.
And you talk about this in your research, in your books. You talk about having a meaning-infused culture. Now, we've talked about purpose, we've talked about inspiration, but we also need to see it and feel it in our cultures themselves. Because as much as I can come with passion, if I show up at work that seems aimless, then I'm going to not feel attached or connected to the organization in which I work. So how do companies thread that purpose through the culture to strengthen it and reinforce it?
Well, so we can do it from the top and also from bottom, if you will. If we do it from top, then we're talking about making sure that there's always that communication of what are we doing here at this company? What are we up to? Why does it matter? And that's a thread of communication. There's stories about that. Maybe customers are brought in and sharing how the company's products or services help them directly, so people understand I'm connected to that. And then from the bottom part, if you will, that's where you're really recognizing, you as the manager especially are recognizing Russell is my guy that does this job for me, and being able to recognize, Russell, you just brought it home for us, and you are living the talk here, you're living the values of this organization, and because of your contribution last week, we actually now can realize this project that we've had on the books now for 2 years. Those are all that communication, people recognizing how people know they matter. That is something that needs to be communicated. And again, back to diversity, in a way that is important to that employee. Some people want to be trotted across stage and given an award. Others would be horrified and quit if you did that to them, right? There's so much that you can do and then to encourage your people to also walk the talk and be supportive of each other. Reward and encourage when somebody says, I just want to do a shout out for Russell. He was in this meeting last week and he brought up a point that nobody else would bring up. And I just want to reward him and thank him for his courage and his model for that. So if you can create an environment where you're now encouraging and rewarding your people to be good and kind and supportive and encouraging and empathetic and empowering for each other, oh man, now you've really created something special.
They have to feel like the purpose they have has value in the organization that they work in.
Oh, and I have definitely felt where who I was in the organization wasn't valued. In fact, my boss, I guess I could put that one in there. She said, it's just too bad that what you really care about, this inspirational stuff, we're just never going to care about that.
But I mean, that's great information to know, because you're like, great, I will stop wasting my time.
It was a contract job. It was a 6-month contract job. And she didn't say that to be diminishing to me. She really was, I'm so sorry that this is the situation.
And yeah, I mean, it's so helpful to be able to be in a position where you're like, okay, my purpose doesn't align with your purpose. Let's talk again in 3 years. Maybe you will have changed, maybe you won't.
Yeah.
But let's not end the relationship. Relationships at work. I got to plug relationship in there somewhere. And how important relationships have. So yeah, maybe that's one more question I want to ask. How do relationships in the workplace help inspire or diminish purpose? Because you're not islands. We work with teams. We work with other human beings. How can that be fostered, or anything we need to avoid when it comes to relationships with others?
Well, the first thing that I like to say about that is I really want to encourage people to try as much as they can to replace judgment, which is a natural thing that we all do, with genuine curiosity and compassion. If you can just start there, a lot's going to help. And so remove your belief. I know Russell is trying to undermine me. I know he is. I see him in these meetings. And so you hang through these stories, and that is just, it's very toxic and negative. So that's the other thing I'd say is if you could always try to assume a good intention. I believe Russell is a good human being. I think he's got great ideas. I don't think he's trying to run me down or get my job or whatever. That goes a huge long way if you can just do those two things.
I did an exercise once with a team where we did a values exercise. Everybody does a values exercise. But the key part that we found interesting was we also did a motivation exercise. So everybody in the team figured out what their motivation, their primary and their secondary motivation to be in the workplace. And then we talked about it. We talked about it as a group so that everybody understood that my motivation is not your motivation, is not your motivation, but we still like working together.
Yeah.
So when we need others to help us or to support us or to anything, we knew how to communicate with them because we understand what buttons for lack of a better term, buttons we need to push, because their purpose, though didn't align, was still valuable and still needed to be supported because we're all rowing in the same direction.
That's beautiful. That's a huge start. And that goes back again to, let's look for every human being as a unique, valuable, interesting human being that deserves compassion, understanding, grace.
I love the dot after grace because it's all about humanity, and I appreciate that immensely.
Let's double down on humanity, man. Let's do it.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I thank you for hammering home the importance of having purpose in the workplace, not only as individuals, but as leaders and as organizations. So thank you for that, Alise. You're not getting off the hook, though, because I have one last question to ask you, which is, what's one simple action people can do right now to improve those relationships at work?
Well, you're not going to be surprised by this. Extend kindness. Extend kindness, which means you look beyond yourself and you just think, what could I do to help Russell? Could I say something? Russell, I just want to say, man, I just see how you bring a concentration like nobody else does. Just start looking for ways you can celebrate other people or be kind to them. I mean, I know that sounds like kindergarten, but that's what we need to do. We have to go back to kindergarten to make this stuff work, I think.
That is Dr. Alise Cortez. She's a speaker, author, organizational psychologist, and logotherapist. She's written 2 books I highly recommend you check out. One is called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business, and Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Unleash Passion and Elevate Cause. She's also the Chief Ignition Officer for Gusto Now. Thank you so much for being here, Alise.
Thanks for having me, Russell. You are fabulous.
And just like that, episode 250 is done. It's finished. Thanks again to Dr. Cortez for joining us for this milestone. And again, I can't thank you enough for being a fan, a supporter of the show. Again, I'll be talking about some of my lessons learned from 250 episodes in the mini episode coming out on Thursday and in the Raw Note newsletter, which you can always subscribe to by going to russellolacher.com. At the top, free newsletter. It's right there. Just click on the buttons, follow the prompts, and you'll have that bright and shiny in your inbox. But yeah, thank you. This means a lot to me because it's been a lot of work and my brain's bigger for it. And without being too selfish, it's all about me and my experience, but it's also what I've heard from you and heard that's helped you along and supported your journey in leadership and employee engagement and workplace culture, because you know it's important and you want to prioritize it. So thank you for making relationships at work a part of that. Yeah. Gratitude, my friend, gratitude. Okay. Well, we'll see you again. 251. Still feels weird to say. Take care.